infertility is in most cases if you don't have, as a real a real organic issue in terms of, I don't know, you're missing ovaries or something, then your infertility is a different kind of story. But if all of the organs and hormonal producing organs and all that are technically there, then in the most of the cases, what's happening is that your body is...
This is the most fun part for me to say. When you mention the formation of cell, like 1,249,299,999,999 cells, and after 9 months you get to hold your baby. So that was a very interesting thing when I read, and it's not that straightforward.
For men and for women, 3 months before the pregnancy is already, you have like this, what they call now the trimester zero, because the sperm of the men are made kind of in the 3 months before the pregnancy. This is the time span that you produce your sperm. And also the egg cell doesn't just mature over one cycle, it matures over a period roughly of the same length of 3 months. So your health in this time and your life conditions in general in this time already make a huge impact. I also really hate the effects that misconception has on people's lives, and especially on women's lives, because we have this huge story of the biological clock is ticking, and women in their mid-late 20s already feel it and base all their decisions on that kind of thing. Whereas men just kind of chill and don't feel like this age thing has anything to do with their lives. And the reality is that
Welcome to Knowing Who You Are, to another episode of Knowing Who You Are, as you know, and you are quite used to on Knowing Who You Are when I'm talking to mindset coach, professional coach, and talking about health and well-being and mindfulness. But today we have a completely different topic, because we are going to talk about fertility, or the issues related to infertility. With me today to talk about the topic is an author, coach, and an engineer as well. You'll know more about it as I go along and we have this conversation. And we'll be discussing about the topic of infertility from her own experiences, and also her involvement in her community through writing the book and her research. So let me welcome Sandra Winterbach. How are you?
Hello, Ershad. I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Sandra, it's really a pleasure. And when I met you first time, it was really a coincidence how we started talking. And it happened with me many times, and through, say, for example, in a coffee shop, just in a bookshop. That's how we met. And I came to know that you have written a book on infertility, and based on your own experiences and the work you have done in your community with other people through coaching. So first of all, give us an idea about your background and where you're coming from and what you have done in your previous life, if I can put it that way. So
Definitely.
they have a better idea, because I know that every now and then you say that, no, I want to get to the origin of things. I want to know why it happens, because I'm an engineer. So, or I was an engineer, practicing engineer. You're still an engineer, but the thing is that that's not what
Yeah.
you do, probably, I understand. So yeah, please give us a little bit of background about yourself.
Yeah, well, I love the name of your podcast, Knowing Who You Are, because
Thank you.
that's the story of my life too, for sure. Um, I always wanted to be a journalist when I was a teenager. I thought I was going to be this investigative journalist who was going to, bring down the powerful people of the world and hold them accountable and all this kind of stuff. But then at some point I got a little bit older and I realized, if I also at some point want to have children, how am I gonna combine these two lives? It kind of sounds a bit tricky to do. So I tried to stay a bit open and see what else I would maybe enjoy. And I became an engineer by coincidence, kind of because I had this holiday job where I worked in a food factory, pet food factory, and we were packaging foods. And I just looked at it was a very boring job. It was a student job and very repetitive. So I had a lot of space in my head left to look around and see all the processes that were going on and how they were doing things. And I always came home at night and spent like half an hour giving my parents like this impulse monologue about how they should fix the factory. Um, and so at some point I thought this was when I was like 17. So right around the time when it was about picking, which uni are you going to go to and what are you going to study and all this kind of stuff. So I thought, maybe this is a career that I would enjoy. And that's a little bit more sort of, I don't know, plannable, predictable. I was very big on planning back in that life. Um,
Not
so I
now
had this
anymore. Not anymore.
no, that's part of the story. So I had this plan. I had this plan. I was going to go to uni. I was going to become an engineer. I was going to join some big corporate, start a big career, and then go back to uni to do my master's degree when I have my children, which were going to come at 27 and 29. And then, I had this plan kind of until I was gonna turn 30, and I didn't really know what was after that, but I felt at 18 that having a plan until 30, was good
Mm.
enough for now, and I would figure out the rest later. And so that's what I did. I became an engineer and I went to the big corporate and I, had a career there and all this kind of stuff. I had the guy to have children with since I was 17 too, so that all worked out nicely. And then I was 27 when we wanted to start trying to get pregnant, which I always thought was going to take me 2 seconds. I literally um, came out of the gynecologist, um, out of my gynecologist when she had removed my contraception. And I basically on the street still already Googled, okay, what day is my baby gonna be born? Because I assumed,
Mm.
it was gonna
Is
be
that easy, straightforward?
instantaneous. I've always been scared to don't get pregnant accidentally. It's gonna ruin your whole life and blah. There was family story like that too, and so that was always my biggest fear. Don't get
Mm.
pregnant accidentally. And then at some point I wanted to get pregnant and it wouldn't work. And for a lot of months there was just nothing. There was just a whole lot of PMS and cycle issues, which every cycle was different, which made me believe every cycle that maybe now I'm pregnant. That's why this is all different now. And what it really was my body trying to figure out what on earth to do with all these hormones and everything. Now that for the first time since I was 14 or 15, I think, I was off hormonal contraception.
Mm.
So my body had some figuring out to do. And then I was pregnant for the first time in March 2020, so just when COVID hit. Good
Okay.
time. And I basically immediately had the first miscarriage or missed abortion as it was diagnosed in at the gynecologist back then. And that was the end of one life.
And you were
And
still
this
working as an engineer at that time.
I was, yeah.
Okay.
But I quit my job 2 months after that. It was that first miscarriage was like one of the biggest turning points of my life because I
Mm.
realized I had been unhappy in this job for years already. I kind of already knew this wasn't for me forever. Not because I didn't like engineering, but just the corporate world wasn't for me. I
That was the
needed
wake up
more.
call, I feel like, during the pandemic for many people, professionals. They realized they had the time to think.
Hmm.
Yeah, they discovered
Yeah.
themselves, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's exactly this knowing who you are. And I always one of the reasons back then why I wanted to have a baby was A, my plan, but B, because I wanted a baby, but C, also because in Germany we have really good parental rights and maternity leave and all of that.
Mm.
And it was my way out of the job to catch a break. I could have gotten out with my plan of the two babies and these 2 years and all that. I could have gotten out of this job for 4 years, had some room to figure out what to do. And if nothing sort of came up, I could have gone back because my contract would have still been in place. So
Mm.
for me, having a child at this time wasn't just about the family, it was also about getting a break out of this job. And every cycle that didn't work, this whole when can I get out of here kind of got
Mm.
postponed as well. And that didn't help anything in relaxing someone who's already stressing about the topic.
Because you
And
kind of already checked out, you already had this plan that this will give me a break, then so that
yeah,
added some pressure, I guess.
totally,
Yeah.
totally. And then this miscarriage came, and I realized for the first time, I asked myself the question, what if I'm never going to be a mother? What if I never get to give birth to a living baby? And so I never get go on maternity leave. And am I just gonna, stay in this loop forever now? People just kept telling me, my gynecologists, they all just kept telling me, you're still young, it'll just keep trying. I'm like, how many times do you want me to try it?
Mm.
Like, why is this happening? I didn't understand, and that's what you already alluded to. It didn't make any sense. I was 27. I was supposed to be in my sort of still kind of at the end of my most fertile window. Like this was not supposed to be difficult. Everyone in my
Mm.
family had always gotten pregnant immediately. Why was I the exception now? It didn't make any sense. And so that that first miscarriage led me to quit my job, and it also led me to then do a lot of soul searching into this question of who am I?
Mm.
What do I want to do with my life? And then also a whole lot of research because nobody was giving me the answers that I wanted, so I needed to find them myself. And that's kind of how one thing led to another, and at the end of the day, this book exists. And
That's great. I mean, and my privilege, that's how we met as well.
yeah, right. Well, the book has a story of its own too. It's the first time I published it was in April 2022. That was as an ebook. It still had a different title. And we sold it ourselves, me and my co-author, on her podcast. And then I always wanted to print it though, because lots of people told me, oh, I'll buy it once you printed it. I'm like, really? I love ebooks, but people don't somehow as much
Mm.
as printed books. So I'm like, okay, then we'll figure out how to print it. I had no idea how to print a book, but I am an engineer and I've done lots of logistics and e-commerce and all this kind of stuff. So I'm like, okay, let's figure this out. So then in fall 2023, I did a crowdfunding campaign to get the finances. And then in January, 19th of January 2024, I had my book. That's when it was delivered. Now I'm figuring out how to do this publishing game. And I'm also teaching dance now, as fate would have
Okay,
it.
great.
So
That's the interesting thing about I found that, say, for example, when I read about you, that you are more comfortable introducing yourself, especially on podcast, online, and everywhere, as an author and a coach rather than an engineer. So,
Mhm.
because I have similar stories as well, because in my previous life, I was a lawyer. I studied law. That's what I did because wanted to be an engineer up until after I finished my college. And this is what I had known that I want to be. But there was a point my parents suddenly changed their mind at the end. They didn't want to send me away because I was supposed to go to America. And they said, no, he's young to be sent away. And other people in the family, they said, no, it's not the right thing to do for a young person. Keep him with you. Whole dream shattered and changed as well. And someone guided me, oh, you should study law. That's a good subject. I said, really? Okay, let's do it. And once I started, bachelor's, then did the master's, started practicing, got my license. And I also wanted to be a barrister. But halfway through, I realized I don't enjoy it. I mean, for many people, it's an enjoyable profession and they enjoy it. And also, there are many talented, amazing lawyers around. But the thing is, if it's not for me. Say, for example, we
Mm.
already have, and this is the idea of knowing what you want and what your purpose in this world is and what you're here for. So that was the important thing. And knowing what I know now, and also since I wanted to do this interview with you, I had to do my own research, which I probably hadn't done before like this. I came to learn that it's not only on the women, and it's the men as well. They have almost equal responsibility and also the obligation and also the failure rate that could equally fall on men too.
Yeah.
So for many people, how they just accept it as a gift. And every now and then we look around, you see our children, someone has a child, they're not even mindful of them. It just comes to them so easily. And this is the mindset we have. Oh, okay, it's easy to have a child. But then we end up finding that it's not that easy. So in
Mm.
your case, that's how you found the hard truth and that prompted you to write that book. So the first time when you found out about this one, from there, it was 2020, and then your third and the last miscarriage, you said in 2021. And that's
Yeah.
when you had written the book. Did you find that it has changed your life in a certain way? Definitely, you discovered yourself, but your mindset about what we take for granted in life and how things are not that easy in life, and we need to work for things.
Nothing is the way it was anymore after this than before for me. Everything in my life changed in substantial ways, except for the fact I still live in the same city, same apartment,
Hmm.
still married to the same man, but we opened the relationship, so that's also completely different now. Um, but yeah, no, it changes everything because it forces us to, or that's what happened for me anyways. Infertility forced me to face reality. Before the miscarriage, I was a head-based person. I was,
Mm,
plans and, this and that, and doing all the things that were sort of societally celebrated and accepted, and everyone was super proud and impressed and whatnot of the things that I achieved. And I wasn't paying attention to reality. The reality was that for years my health had declined, and
mm,
I didn't even notice. I just didn't stop to think about it, and I didn't. If I did think about it, it was like, well, that A, there's nothing you can do about it, and B, that's just what happens when you get older. And I mean, mind you, I was mid-20s, but I was already feeling like I was getting old
mm.
because I was amassing all these sort of symptoms over time.
So you're talking about the decline in health leading up to the pregnancy in
Yeah,
2020. Okay.
yeah, yeah. Ever since puberty, basically,
Mm,
I was having issues. And they just kind of kept building. None of them were super dramatic. Like some of them were, so my hair falls out.
mm,
That's me just being vain, kind of being concerned about that. Like it doesn't matter. You shouldn't even worry about that. So yeah, it's annoying. And then you went to the doctors and they give you this sort of liquid that you're supposed to put on top of your scalp.
mm,
And that's supposed to make the hair stop from falling. And I'm thinking, yeah, but I'm gonna do that for the rest of my life. Like, this is not again, this wasn't a root cause based treatment. This was just yeah, your hair's falling out, so just put this on top and then it won't
mm,
fall out. But it didn't go into why this was happening.
mm.
And
I
if
mean,
people
that
had gone
brings
into
me to
that,
interrupt you to the question. I feel like, because there are things, there are a lot of dimensions to it, and we want to talk about it. To start with, what are the most common causes of infertility in both men and women you found in your research? Straightforward, like if
Um,
we, because everyone starts, okay, this
yeah,
is the common cause. Even if you go to see a doctor, that's where they start from. But you talked
yeah,
about your health, your well-being, and how there are other factors. We'll get into that and talk in detail. But
yeah.
to start with, what are the most common causes you've found in your research?
There's one most common cause, and that's us ignoring reality, us ignoring that we're biological, chemical, physical, laws in place in our bodies,
Hmm.
and that our bodies need inputs so they can produce the outputs that we want, the healthy outputs, and fertility is one expression of health. And we don't do that. We completely ignore all of it, and it causes a lot of stress in our systems, not just the, I had a busy day at work kind of stress, but also heaps of emotional stress, heaps of chemical and biochemical stress in terms of toxins, in terms of deficiencies, in terms of I don't know, not sleeping, not eating right, not moving anymore, not being outside in daylight anymore. We're completely ignoring the fact that our bodies are and like an ecology kind of.
Hmm.
And that's how they work. And we're cutting them off from all the inputs that they need. And then we're asking to be extremely output driven anyhow. And we
Hmm.
can kind of keep that going for some time. And some people last a little bit longer and others kind of crash sooner. But it's always this balance of
Hmm.
what do we put in versus what do we want to get out on the other side. And um, it's the same root cause that causes burnout. It's the same root cause that causes everything. Infertility is, in most cases, if you don't have as a real organic issue in terms of, I don't
Hmm.
know, you're missing ovaries or something, then your infertility is a different kind of story. But if all of the organs and hormonal producing organs and all that are technically there, then in the most of the cases, what's happening is that your body is dialing down your fertility on purpose. It's a coping mechanism, it's a prioritization mechanism that your body does in a time of need, in a time of lack, in a time
Hmm.
of stress where it says, look, I have like, I don't know, 5 units of energy and I kind of need 10 just to keep my normal life running.
Hmm.
So what can I cut? What's not gonna contribute to my survival for the next 5 minutes. And fertility is just top of that list because fertility is a huge energy investment, both for men and women. Um, and it takes years for your child to, be on its own again, even
Oh, on,
after the
on that
pregnancy.
note, I read your chapter, which you shared with me, the English translation of that one. And on the face of it, it's pretty simple. Someone gets
Yeah.
inseminated and then you're pregnant, everything happens. But even for the journey, the 24, less than 24 hours that it takes, the journey, how you broke it down in your book, that was so interesting and also so complex and so daunting to think about it. And which starts even from the time of puberty for both men and women. And it has significance, and the journey that happens from the time of conception. And then you broke down the whole journey and once how it travels through the ovary and where it goes, how it lands, and some of them make it, some of them don't. And after that, this is the most fun part for me to say, when you mention the formation of cell, like 1,249,249,999,999,999 cells, and after 9 months you get to hold your baby. So that was a very interesting thing when I read, and it's not that straightforward. So if we talk about the physiological issues for both men and women, say, for example, if since you have done your research, you can probably shed light on sperm motility, morphology, the shape, and also their hormonal imbalances are there. And for women, how age is a concern. and also endometriosis, so different conditions and things like that. And did you find that in your research? Basically, that's what everyone talks about. That's what they think. But you touched upon something which I've read also in your blog, which you had written in Medium. You talked about
Mhm.
those issues because we ignore completely the well-being side of things. We always go into the medical side of things and physiological side of things. But what to do with your health and holistic well-being, we totally, completely ignore it most of the time.
On principle, it's exactly the same for men and women on a very sort of logical kind of level. Of course, there are differences in the end because one of us produces an egg cell and the other one produces a sperm, and one of us carries a pregnancy and the other one doesn't. But on the general physiological logics behind it, it's kind of the same story. It's always your nervous system. That's where it starts. That your brain, but not just your brain, all your sensory cells, all your nerves through your body that collect information all the time, internally from your body and outside of the world. And that's the part of you that then decides, okay, what are we going to do? And they make this decision and send this decision to all the rest of your organs. And that's how then your hormones get produced because your
Mm.
nervous system tells your different body parts, okay, we want this much of this hormone and this much of that hormone and this much of that hormone. And then those hormones get produced. So that's one of the parts where when we look at fertility, we kind of already um, start too late in the process because we just look at the hormones and we're like, you have this many of that and this many of that, and that's not enough or whatever. But then we don't go into this, okay, why? Why is this hormonal structure the way it is? Um, because the hormones are produced on purpose and your body can change it. And also your hormones fluctuate during the day. You don't have the same level of cortisol, for example, throughout the day. It goes on this kind of curve. It kind of starts high in the morning and then it's supposed to kind of drop down, and so at night you can sleep because you have low cortisol levels. And then there's the thyroid hormones who kind of go in this opposite direction, who kind of start a little bit slower, but then towards the afternoon they're peaking. That's when it's supposed to be super, creative and stuff from that, and then they kind of go down a bit again. And this is the same in men and women, essentially, that
Mm.
the circadian rhythm of your body during the day. And then of course there are the sexual hormones that fluctuate differently in men and women, but they're still the same hormones. They're different levels a little bit because we want to achieve a slightly different outcome.
But does it
But
affect what
it's
time of the day they're trying, say a couple when they're trying to get conceived? So is there a particular time of the day they should be trying or things like that?
um from the women's perspective, it's not the time of the day, obviously. It's more the time of the month,
Mm.
or of your cycle. Um, from the man's perspective, kind of, yeah, because you're producing a lot of your sperm overnight, and your testosterone levels are higher in the morning than they are in the evening in a,
Mm.
normal
Hmm.
physiology. Um, so technically, from that perspective, like erections and all that would kind of come a little easier in the mornings,
Hmm.
um, than at night. And usually we do it the other way around. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I
Right.
was thinking when you're telling me. Yeah.
But then again, the sperm is kind of produced in sort of batches and stored. So it's not that you produce it overnight and then you send it out straight away
Mm.
in the morning. So there's not necessarily, I think, a time of day per se that is better than
Yeah.
others if you want to have a baby.
Does age have anything to do for both on men and women, and does it affect them differently?
This is one of my most favorite questions.
Why is that?
Bec- because there's such a big misconception around it,
Mm.
and I also really hate the effects that that misconception has on people's lives and especially on women's lives because we have
Mm.
this huge story of the biological clock is ticking and women in their mid late 20s already feel it and base all their decisions on that kind of thing. Whereas men just kind of chill and don't feel like this age thing has anything to do with their lives. And the reality is that both of those perceptions are wrong. Men have a biological clock, too. Their testosterone levels at 40 are sort of, don't name me on the numbers now, it's a bit of a time that I did the research, but I think half of what they
Mm.
are when you're 20. So it's a huge decline, that impacts your fertility. And at the same time, it's not about time at all. It's not a time correlates with your fertility, but it
Mm.
doesn't cause your fertility. And
Mm.
I think that is something that is wildly ignored and not understood, that I am more fertile now at 32 than I was when I was 27. If
Mm.
time, was the factor to determine my fertility, that would be impossible because it's
So it's
5 years
not
later.
chronological, sometimes it's biological too. It's not the
It's
number.
always
Yeah.
biological. It's
Mm.
always biological. Well, what happens over time is that we accumulate more issues.
Mm.
We accumulate more health issues. We go deeper into our bankruptcy in terms of, health storage. And that affects our fertility. So there is a correlation.
Hmm.
But the cause of it is that our health declines because our choices aren't aligned with what we need to maintain our health. So
Mm.
there is for both genders, for men and women, there is a component of time, but it's just not true that there is an egg quality that is forced to decline over time.
But
And on
is
the
it, I
contrary,
read somewhere that by the age of 35 for women, the decline is quite steep, but for men, that is gradual. Is it true?
no, in this, general phrasing, it's not true because
Mm.
there are women whose egg quality improve. There are women whose, hormonal levels improve. There's this
Mm.
one very famous hormone, it's called anti-Müller hormone, AMH, that is used for by some doctors and clinics. It's used as the number one indicator of your egg cell reserve and all this kind of stuff. And it's supposed to only decline over time, but it doesn't. When you actually do the tests with people, some of them, their hormonal levels go up over time instead of down.
So it
So
feels
it's
like
it's
that
not true.
it's not only biological, that there definitely are the lesser known factors that we don't factorize and we don't think about them when we talk about it. It's just very black and white. Okay, it's the age, say a certain woman or a man getting older, testosterone level is low, or she's over the age of 35. But as you said, it's a biological, it's not only in the number. Yeah,
If I
please.
can just add one more thing to that, it's also a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's the part that gets me the most because we ingrain the story in, especially in women's brains, from such a young age that automatically our stress levels rise as we get older, and that's the number one killer of fertility. And every time we go to a doctor when we're 35, if we're not extremely lucky of having like a cool doctor, which they also exist, but most of the time we'll go to the doctors and we'll tell them, look, I want to have a baby. Is there anything I should know? And
Mm.
then be like, ooh, they look at you with this, how old are you? And oh, yeah, that's not going to work. And then we go home and all our mothers and grandmothers and uncles and friends and whatnot are going to look at you like, you're 42 and you want to have a baby? Like,
Mm.
are you insane? That child's gonna have a disability for sure. And
What a
get
great point.
inundated with all of this negative information and all of this discouraging information that in itself creates worse conditions for a healthy pregnancy.
Mm. So if we talk about, probably it indirectly answered my question because I was getting into the less known factors, or sometimes we don't discuss about them. This could be one of these, the societal perception, and also
Yeah.
overall, sometimes we don't take into consideration that biologically it's not always true and it doesn't apply to everyone. So what causes the decline once we understood that, okay, there's some kind of biological correlate, if we put it that way, but uh, what other factors of decline are there and how to improve it? Say, for example, for, as you mentioned, for some women, it can change.
For all women, it can change. And it changes all the time.
Mm.
Give me the woman who says every single one of her cycles is exactly the same. You've never had two cycles that were exactly the same in your entire life, not ever, not once. So our fertility changes all the time because our cycle is directly connected to our fertility. So if I don't have the exact same cycle, I'm going to have a different quality egg cell. That's always the case. And also for men, they're not producing the same kind of sperm every day. They literally tell you that when you go and get your sperms checked and you go to the doctor to give them the semen sample and everything. And then you come back, you get the results, and they look at you like, oh, yeah, well, that's not so great. But don't worry, in 3 months it could look completely different. That's what they literally tell you in the clinics. But they don't think about why. And they don't try to understand these factors really, or I'm generalizing. Obviously, not everyone is like that, but in a very broad experience, that's the case. That it's just everyone knows this fluctuates all the time. And yet the story is kind of this linear decline and linear, everything's just going to get worse. And that's just not the reality. That's not what the data shows ever.
So if we bring it to, say, for example, in your case, what caused the decline and how did you improve? So, because it's your personal experience, you know it better. So, if
Yeah.
you could share with us, please.
Yeah. Understanding what my body needs. Starting with sleep. I need sleep. Sleep is extremely important on your hormonal levels because a lot of um, those processes kind of happen while you sleep. There's lots of studies around linking your estrogen levels to the hours you sleep. And also in men, I have a study in my book where I think they did it for a week. They put a group of men on 5 hours of sleep just for 1 week, and their testosterone levels declined something like equivalent to 10 years of age in
Mm.
1 week. So sleep is one of the main drivers. I had huge sleep issues at the time when I wanted to have a child myself. I was always worrying about, couldn't stop thinking about work, the hamster wheel in my head. I couldn't fall asleep. I woke up early thinking about work and all this kind of stuff. So that's huge, huge driver.
Lack of
Yeah,
exercise or too much? Because
exercise.
it's very interesting when I read that too much exercise can also
Yeah,
damage. Yeah.
totally, because too much exercise, again, is stress. You're spending a lot of resources
Mm.
that you don't necessarily have. It's always about this balance. There's no black and white. Every person needs to have this level of exercise. It depends on how much energy do you have
Mm.
available and how much of that do you want to spend on exercise and how much of it do you want to spend on others. A person who is basically in burnout or just, before it shouldn't do a lot of high intensity trainings because they don't have the energy for it. They can push through it with a lot of adrenaline and all that and sort of squeeze the last pieces of energy out of your body. And so it works and you kind of feel great because that's what exercise does. But it's in the long term, you're not going to be able to keep this up. So moderate exercise, moderate movement, especially movement outdoors in nature, preferably if you can, is amazing for your body because that's what it needs. It gets circulation going. Blood circulation is super important for the nutrients to get to all the places in your body that it's supposed to get, and for your immune system to work properly, all sorts of things. So exercise and movement in the right level, super, super important.
And that's why this medication like steroids and antidepressants and also gut health had been brought in as well. I mean, people have talked about it too, chronic inflammation, things like that, how it
Yeah,
affects.
yeah.
So, and then you started working with people around you, women, especially you started helping couple or just women? Did you work with, like, how did you start working or started coaching? What prompted that for you?
I coached more on general life questions than on fertility, because I think Um, for me, coaching on fertility is a little bit tricky. Like, there's a
Mm,
lot of people who sort of reach out when they read the book, and then it's like, okay, can you help me with this and that now? But I am not um, a medical doctor or
hmm
anything. And there is no pill, anyone, even if I was a doctor, there is no pill I can prescribe to be like, look, this is what you need, and then it's fixed. So it's a lot of work for many people to understand that the approach, at least that I describe in my book, and that I really truly believe in, is a very holistic approach, and it starts in your head. It starts in the decisions that you make for yourself, and it starts in how well in your mindset and in how well you're able to honestly look at the feedback, the data that your body gives you in terms of how can you sort of improve. And then this strategy goes is a very long-term one. It's not a, okay, in half a year we're done with this and then you'll have a baby. It's more like this process is probably going to take you 2, 3 years. And a lot of women, especially, don't feel like they have that time because of, with the age topic we already discussed. Um, and so it's really, yeah, really challenging for many to go into, to really bel switch into believing this, okay, I'm going to give this a couple of years now, and then we'll try it again. A lot of women feel that they don't have this time, this luxury to do that, and it's you don't get a do-over, right? You can't say, okay,
mm.
I try this for 3 years, and if it doesn't work, I'll go back and I try this other thing. So
But you
many
need to first
people,
go through the changes in your lifestyle first before you start trying, because otherwise you'll get the same result.
yeah, that I mean, that's what I always thought when my doctors were telling me, just keep trying. I'm like, how many miscarriages do you want me to amass over time? I'm going to get the same result if I don't change the inputs. It's like, there's this line in a song that I love, which goes something like, if you're being, if you're playing with the same hand of cards, how do you expect another result to come out? Like, you're only
Exactly.
going to be able to get to recreate the same.
And also, isn't there long-term damage as well that can, or it will have an impact like that many miscarriages? Because you mentioned to me, you know someone or you met someone who had 17 miscarriages?
Yeah. Biologically, I don't think so, necessarily. Like, you can
Okay.
have as many, like, that's a normal, you basically have a failed pregnancy every cycle, if you want to, put it to
Hmm.
the extreme.
Hmm.
That's just what kind of happens. The problem is if it drains your resources and you don't fill them up. And then, of course, the emotional, psychological
But
issues
you can
that,
replenish, right?
yeah, you can. Totally. You can replenish those. No issue at all. But you need to be able to deal with the emotional side of things. You need to be able to deal with the relationship dynamics that produces. And if all of those, are fine and you don't amass more and more stress because of it, then there's absolutely zero reason why, just because you had a couple of miscarriages, you should have more. The reason why there is studies that prove, um, proof that the more miscarriages you have, the more likely you are to have another one,
Mm.
is because these couples had issues to start with, and if they don't fix those issues, if they don't manage to identify the issues, then of course they are going to, for the same reasons, have miscarriages again. But if you change the conditions in which you're trying for a baby, you get new odds.
I really love that point you mentioned about the self-fulfilling prophecy, that how people around us, they condition us to a certain extent, and they give us this idea. And because the thing is that how we think, what we think, the quality of our thoughts, everything affects our body as well.
Yeah,
This is very interesting. So in your case, when you suffered, like you, in your case, it was 3 miscarriages. And how did it affect your mental health, personal mental health, but then the quality of your relationship? And if
yeah,
that happened, what did you do? Or how did you figure it out? Or did you
yeah,
seek any help?
yeah. Psychologically, that was the most difficult time of my life. I felt completely helpless, completely desperate, completely powerless. Um, I was also, physically in bad health, but just mentally, I knew um, it was bad. It was really bad. And also our relationship suffered from it a lot
Mm.
because there is relationships thrive when you can have empathy for each other and understand each other. And then it doesn't really matter how many troubles you're going through. If you can
Mm.
stay with each other through that, your relationship can actually get stronger through it. But the reality of infertility is that men and women's experiences are very, very different biologically.
Mm.
You cannot have the same experience that I have. It's just impossible because it's not happening in your body. You're not bleeding for however many days when you have a miscarriage and all of that. And so it's very, very not just biologically, but also socially, the expectations, the role models and understandings that we have, everything is different. So the experience of a miscarriage for men and women is very different. There's hardly ever a couple where both are having the exact same kind of emotional process that
Mm.
they're going through. And this is a challenge. And this is a reason why many couples um, through infertility, not always straight in it, but then sometimes a couple of years after, many people who struggled with fertility break up. Many relationships don't make it. Many fertility treatments get stopped because of the emotional pressure of it and the
Mm.
relationship dynamics that produces as well. More people actually leave fertility clinics without a healthy child at the end of the day than with, and that's something nobody is aware of. And a lot of people leave because the stress is too much and the dynamics that creates is too much as well. And so the way to help is for me was writing this book was self-help, really. It was a way to empower myself again, to identify the levers that I can control, where a
Mm.
lot of it is out of my hands no matter what I do. But there are so many things that I have power over and that I
Mm.
can make decisions for. So that was a huge part. I had, I don't even know how many therapists on the way, both for myself in different modalities and also for us as a relationship. We sought counsel a couple of times, right in that time or afterwards, because it's a lot to deal with. And it just, it's such a luxury to be able to get some help through it and not to have to do it all by yourself when you have no idea
Mm.
what you're doing. Um, so I can only recommend that
Because
for
I was
everyone.
thinking in society, say, for example, my background is South Asian, I'm from a South Asian country. So especially in countryside, rural areas or in villages, you find many times this is such a stigma. if they don't, someone doesn't have a baby, it's always on the woman.
Yeah.
So they're thinking, okay, there's some kind of problem with the woman. And I understand lack of education is there in rural areas. Sometimes people don't have that enlightenment and also the exposure. But what did you find, even in the West or in developed countries, in the context of Germany, say, for example, that's where you're from? Does it differ a lot, even among educated people, the mindset that no, there's a problem with the woman, and also what it makes a woman feel like that they're a failure, there's some kind of problem, internal problem they cannot change, and they're the main problem here. They're causing the trouble. Did you find that?
Absolutely. It's probably not exactly the same as in some rural areas. In general, the mindset is still exactly the same. This is a women's issue. The woman feels like she failed, and the man kind of sits at the side and doesn't know what to do and feels like they are powerless too.
Hmm.
Men struggle a lot in infertility, seeing their partners suffer the way they do and feeling like they have nothing they can do to help, nothing they can do to alleviate the pain, nothing to contribute in any case. And that is extremely disempowering for men as well.
Hmm.
And it's such a big lie because you're just as responsible for a miscarriage as I am, as crazy as that sounds in our conception at the moment. But I could literally be having a miscarriage only because of a defect in your sperm.
Exactly.
That is, it could have zero to do with me and only to do with the sperm. And people don't realize. But then we're also telling men there's nothing you can do about your sperm quality. It's just shit. So there you go. We've seen that for the last, I think we have data, I don't know, the last 50 years or something. We see that sperm quality in men is declining 1% per year
Hmm.
globally, not just in the West, globally.
Hmm.
1% per year doesn't sound like a lot, but it's an exponential function. So our sperm quality is going down rapidly, and we just we're kind of just not looking at it. We're seeing this data. It's there for decades now, and we don't want to look at it because the questions that this data raises are uncomfortable, and they're linked to climate crisis and everything, to be honest, because we're part of the same ecology.
Hmm.
And they question a lot of very foundational things about how we live our lives these days.
But I feel like people who be watching, especially men, when they watch this conversation we are having at the moment, I'll try to spell it out literally, like in terms of sperm motility, which is the movement of the sperm. If it has the lower quality, or also the morphology, which is like a sperm, say it has the cell, it has a different formation, like the head, the midpiece, and the tail. And even if the head is not oval shaped, that cannot penetrate. And the meat piece, if it's not fully formed, then you cannot have the energy producing mitochondria. And the
Hmm.
tail, it has to have a certain shape. So even though we talk about the ovarian reserve, which the quality or the quantity of the eggs in a woman, which would decline over time. But the thing is that we sometimes don't talk about the sperm qualities as well. Say, for example, even if can move properly, but the morphology, the shape of it, if it's not right, then still it would lack. And half the time, or more than half, the for infertility, men has equal responsibility and equal role to play, and that's what they have done. But most of the time, it's been ignored. But
Yeah.
it's not that sometimes it's from a vicious mindset from the men's point of view, but sometimes it's ignorance. I feel that.
It's always ignorance. It's always lack of education.
Mhm.
Always.
I
On
mean,
both
in
sides.
some societies, definitely they take advantage of it. So it gives them almost like a pass to get married again or have a second wife or things like that, you know? I mean, this is why I want to bring it out in the open because I've seen
Yeah.
it. This is one of the reasons. Because in certain religion, you are permitted to have four wives. But the
Mm.
thing is, and this is one of the reasons you'll just that's the card you're gonna play against that woman, saying that okay, you cannot bear me a child, so it's right for me to get married again, then again, until it's four or something, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
with all due respect to every religion, I have nothing against that. But these are the most important things. So if you have worked with women in the community and you work with the couple and the issues you found, I think we have discussed most of it. But in Germany, as a society, because that's what your experience is from, uh, what are the facilities there at the moment in terms of helping people when they're going through infertility? Country to country, even being in Europe, it would be different in different countries. But what are
Yeah.
the issues that you have found that sometimes is helpful or sometimes not so helpful for people going through such crisis?
Yeah. I think again, one of the main issues is a lack of education and information being freely available to everyone because everyone knows the clinics. Everyone knows you have a gynecologist, and if it doesn't work, you go to them, and then if that doesn't work, you go to the clinic. That's
Hmm.
kind of what we know. The truth is, though, that we also, for example, if you have a miscarriage in Germany, insurance pays for 6 weeks of midwife counseling and all of that during a miscarriage. Nobody told me that, not even on my first miscarriage.
Hmm.
I had to find that out on my own. And a lot of these things, also during miscarriages, for example, it's completely based on luck what your doctor tells you what to do now because miscarriages don't happen the way they're shown on TV. It's not this one cramp where all of a sudden there's like this puddle of blood and then all the drama happens. Most of the miscarriages are super super quiet. The baby dies inside of you and you might not even notice. And there's certainly not blood 2 seconds after. And a lot of women only find out, or couples in general, only find out that their pregnancy isn't going to lead anywhere at the doctor's where they do an ultrasound and they see that there's no
Hmm.
heartbeat anymore, for example. And then what happens is completely luck-based because some doctors will send you straight to hospital to get basically an abortion, except it's not an abortion because the baby's already dead, but it's the same procedure, it's the same operation that is being done to remove the pregnancy.
Hmm.
There are pills that you can take that they're off-label, but they send your body into contractions basically to get rid of the the pregnancy in this way. And the third option that we have is to just wait because your body will naturally at some point in most cases let go in its own way, as it has for millennia
Hmm.
before modern medicine was invented, right? But we don't get this kind of information when we're in this position. You're
Hmm.
at your doctor's office and they tell you to go to the hospital, and then your hospital wants you to do the operation because that's how they make their money, to be honest. They don't
Hmm.
get money for anything else. So it's not that they're going to necessarily push you into that, but this is just that's the incentive in the system is so you're more likely to be led to do that. And
But are there
there's
any ethical debates around it as well? Like in Germany, where there's certain treatment or certain technique they feel like it's not right? Are
Ah,
there?
yeah, definitely. There's also debates about that. A lot of infertility treatments, for example, is with sperm donations or egg cell donations. In Germany, as an example, you can donate sperm, but you can't donate egg cells,
Hmm.
for example. And there's
Why
reasons
is
for
that?
that.
Do you know? What's the mind?
Well, there's probably multiple reasons. One of them is it's a lot easier to get to sperm than to get to egg cells.
Okay.
just mechanically,
Mm,
And then there's a big question around, abuse of that because the process is much more strenuous for women. And
mm,
there's actually a case, there was a case the other days, I don't remember in which country, they actually kind of, in terms of women trafficking and all of that, they held women, they pumped them full of hormones to extract egg cells from them and then sell
oh my
them
God.
to someone for their fertility treatment. So there's ethical arguments to
Mm,
make this much more difficult, for example.
to safeguard.
At the same time, there are countries where it's allowed under certain parameters. Also, the treatments themselves are very different in every country, which makes zero sense to me. One country will, when you go through IVF, for example, one country will generally implant, I don't know, three embryos or two
Mm.
embryos, or not implant, but introduce them into the uterus and then hope that they implant.
It's
Other countries just
IUIU, you're saying.
IVF in that case, yeah,
Okay.
or ICSI. But other countries just do one. And then it's very interesting because you actually look at the statistics of who gets more healthy babies out with the way they do it. And it's not the countries who do two or more egg cells, it's actually the countries who do just one.
Mm.
So there are heaps of differences in every country, and it's not science-based per se, because if you look at the data, there's a winner and then there's a loser kind of in the success rate. So you'd assume why doesn't everyone use the process that the best performing country uses? But that's not what's
Uh,
happening. Everyone does their own thing.
in terms of the scientific advancement, we see that things are changing probably in 6 months now. There had been times when every century things would change. Then we say seeing that probably every 50 years, then 20 years. Now it feels like every other week there's something happening. Things are changing so fast. So is there any technical advancement that has happened that helps fertility now, or which wasn't available during your time, and probably 5 years down the line you find that there are a lot of changes, which is more positive?
In this area, you are not going to have these kind of cycles because this is women's health. You don't
Mm,
get the finances for the research
wow.
and nobody cares. And in the US, they're even scrubbing all the programs now. So, no.
Even in this day and age, I mean, the discrimination is still there. That's very
Yeah.
sad. And I feel that this is why you're quite vehement. When we started talking about it, I always see that how you're quite
Yeah.
forceful in terms of articulating it. Look, it's not only women, because they have to bear most of the responsibility of it. When it comes to infertility, the blame is on them. And now, when the techniques are available or could have been available, now you're saying the funds are being scrapped as well. And in countries like, especially in the US, since definitely you have done your research. So, if you have to, we have talked about the physiological issues, the societal stigmas, and also the mindset of people around you, how they affect you overall, and also the conditions around you, the environmental toxins, and also your lifestyle, diet. So, is there a few words of advice that you have for people who are expecting, who are planning, and also who have already been through miscarriages?
Well, I was expecting miscarriages. Yeah.
Definitely. When I said that, I was thinking people would think, okay, are they, what is he saying? But the thing is, what I was trying to say is that people who are planning to have a family,
Yeah.
have a baby, and then people who have been trying and had been through few miscarriages. But it's a really nice thing that I learned today from you, that it's not the end of it. And
Mm.
there is hope and you can change things. So what would be your advice for people like that?
Well, depends a little bit. You mentioned different groups and my advice. I mean, generally would be educate yourself for all of them. But then on what changes slightly in terms of which group we're talking to. If you're planning to have a baby, if you want to start trying and you have no idea where you are yet, learn about your cycle. Learn a method called NFP, Natural Family Planning, because it allows you to predict your fertile windows. And a lot of infertility in parentheses happens because people don't know when they're ovulating.
Mm.
And they do this very old mechanism of calendar-based kind of math calculation. They think ovulation is in the middle of their cycle, and it's not. Not necessarily. It's more like a coincidence if it's actually in the middle of the cycle. Especially if your cycles aren't the standard, which isn't even a standard 28 days. Your ovulation is not on day 14. Your ovulation changes days, and there are signs in your body that you can observe yourself. You don't have to go anywhere, you don't have to buy any tests. You just need to know how to read your own body for you to know when you're ovulating. And if you're having sex in this window, the chances of you having a child are infinitely higher than if you calculate your ovulation, it's on the wrong day, and then you have sex 4 days after your actual ovulation. You have 0% chance of being pregnant because it's too late. And I have a friend who did that for 1.5 years until she realized she was miscalculating. And she thought she was infertile and all of these things. And it wasn't. It was just that they were using the wrong dates.
Mm.
So that would be number one advice for anyone who is getting you into this. And then for everyone, including this group, it's again, look at your health. Look at what you're putting into your body is literally, I don't know, ask yourself before you eat something or before you drink something, do I want my baby to be made out of this material? Because this is literally what is going to happen is the molecules that the cells of your baby are going to be built of are the molecules that you put in your mouth and you swallow. This is how they come into your body, and this is how they end up in your child. So make sure what you eat and what you drink is healthy. That's the best thing you can do, and especially before you get pregnant, because for men and for women, 3 months before the pregnancy is already, you have like this, what they call now the trimester zero, because the sperm of the men are made kind of in the 3 months before the pregnancy. This is the time span that you produce your sperm. And also, the egg cell doesn't just mature over one cycle, it matures over a period roughly of the same length of 3 months. So, your health in this time and your life conditions in general in this time already make a huge impact. It's like the starting point, the starting investment, if you want to look at it that way, into your healthy pregnancy is already that time. So get in shape, get into the best possible health that you can think of while you're trying, before you try, as early as you can, and also during pregnancies. That's also going to help. The same conditions that increase your fertility also, coincidentally, as if nature had a plan, help a healthy pregnancy and a happy pregnancy, a pregnancy that is just where you are, full of energy, where you're fit, where you can still do things, because that's also possible. And that's another
Mm.
one of those misconceptions that pregnancies have to be horribly suffering times and giving birth has to be horrible and painful. None of that has to be your experience if you set the right conditions.
Thank you. It's such good advice. And now I feel like I don't know how you'll find it. I have a quick fire round for you. And
Yeah, I hate that, but let's try it.
you have to choose one answer to the
Mhm.
questions, and I'll probably ask you a one-liner to give some kind of explanation if I sense that discomfort in you. Like, no, I want to explain it better. Okay, let's start. So, hormones or genetics?
Hormones.
Okay. Uh, Egg quality or sperm quality? You hate that.
Now we talked about it already, so now I
Okay.
can say egg quality.
Okay. Um, And if you have to choose between IVF or IUI, which is in uterine insemination, which one?
Always try IUI first. It's less invasive.
Great. And age or stress?
Stress.
Hmm. But stress can be reversed, can it? But
Of
age you
course.
can't.
Yeah.
But
But then why are you going to worry about something that you can't change anyways?
hmm, good. I like it. To challenge me. Okay, it's the male factor or the female factor, which is more commonly misdiagnosed.
Tricky, but I'd say the male.
I agree. Um, the way forward now, where we are going, especially we have discussed about generations and also where we are heading now. Is it natural towards natural conception or assisted reproduction?
Natural.
Are we getting there or going forward? Because I feel like, how about people are getting more and more late in their pregnancies because they're putting a pause to due to the career and everything, and also the rising or the decline of testosterone, also the hormones you mentioned. So, do you think do we still have hope for natural conception, or it's more artificial going forward?
We Our only hope is natural. I think I'm very fatalistic about this. If the root is artificial, then we're all going to die and humanity is going to stop existing. If we cannot figure out how to make the most basic human function that needs to be in place to keep our species alive, which is being able to conceive a child and giving birth to a child, then we are not learning the lessons we need to learn, and humanity is going to end. So it's either natural or we're all dead.
No, that's a very good point because we are literally handing over that one power we have. And if we hand it over, I think we have lost everything. I mean, after that, I'm not going to ask you any more questions because that's such a beautiful ending. No, Sandra, it's really lovely talking to you, and just time just went by. I didn't realize. And
Yeah, wow.
it's really enlightening for myself as well. I learned a lot discussing, and I hope people who'll be watching it today, they'll be learning a lot. If people want to find out more about you, and definitely when your book comes out, so they can be in the know that the translation is out for other people to read all around the world, where can they find you?
My brand is a Black Sheep World. That's also my website. You can find me on Instagram in a happy black sheep. So if you put my name and black sheep, you'll find me. Also, if you want an English translation, like email me, send me a message because I work on, kind of pull basis. And if there's enough people who are like, terrorizing me every day that they want this English translation, I'm much more likely to do it quickly than if there isn't. So if you want this book in English, find me, send me a message, and yeah, then we'll see when it comes.
Now, I have the opportunity of reading a chapter of the translation, and your character, literally, your voice comes through. When I was reading it,
Mhm.
I feel that the humor is there, and also there's a little bit indifferent, if I can say it that way, that, you know, a very carefree way of thinking, how you write, how you talk, and your book. I can see that there, and also how you make it simple for people to understand the
Mm.
difficult scientific terminology. How you broke it down, you made it so easy for people to understand. I feel like even someone who is probably 14, 15, they might even understand the whole process if they take the time. So, Sandra, I won't take any more of your time. I'm sure you have other things to do and more people to help. And thanks for your time. And it's a lovely conversation. And looking forward to once the book comes out, probably we'll get to have another chat. And in the
I
meantime,
would love
have a
that.
great day.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, Ershad. It was a pleasure.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.